The number one way to improve your relationship is to start recognizing the ruts. These are a few common unhealthy communication patterns that I see are killing relationships today. So ruts are what I call the negative relational patterns that couples fall into. It's the simple things that we do naturally that are negative. Identifying and disrupting these patterns is essential to breaking free and creating a healthier dynamic. So let me just quickly run through a bunch of different ruts, and I want you to see if you have any of these in your relationship. One is called the pursuer-withdrawer, where one partner is always initiating the talk and the other is always avoiding it. It's the chase, the crash, and then the withdrawal, right? The chase, where one of us has to chase the other on an issue. The crash, where we finally come together to talk about it and it blows up. And then guess what happens? The avoid. We then withdraw from each other, cold shoulder, and we don't talk to each other. That is the most common rut in relationships. Another is reactivity, where the minute somebody says that, the other partner reacts to it and almost ups the ante. And then this one reacts to it and ups the ante, and it constantly elevates the fight. How about negative interpretation? That's another rut. That's where you see your partner's actions through a negative lens. If you could see them positively, negatively, or neutral, you now have a habit of seeing what they're doing as negative. They did that on purpose. They did that to hurt your feelings. They did that because they don't care. That's another rut that we got to watch out for. Another one is self-fulfilling prophecies, right? Where we expect conflict. We expect the partner not to care. And it weirdly always ends up being that way. In the end, these negative ruts are things that we have to fix. There's a great sign that I remember hearing about at the opening of a huge wildlife reserve in Alaska. And the sign says this simple little phrase, choose your rut carefully because you will be in it for hundreds of miles. Whatever rut that was run down by those trucks going into that refuge and that preserve, whichever rut you're in, it's going to be hard to get out of. So choose your ruts carefully. In our relationships, we can have positive ruts too. They're called just positive habits. We break the cycle by stopping the pursue and withdraw chase and instead intentionally making the decision based on our most important values in the marriage. What are we really about? We can assume positive intent in our partner, and we can do that to counteract the negative interpretation of others. Dr. Paula Lack-Davis taught me 3 really important keys to forming these habits. She calls them cues, routines, and rewards. Recognize the cues that you're in the fight or flight pattern. Those cues, very basically, are negative emotion, misunderstanding and confusion, and mistrust. Whenever you see those cues, you're in a rut. Okay. Second thing I want you to do is pay attention to the routine. Learn to take the time to get out of the fight or flight routine and choose a new routine. Another thing that you can do outside of the routines is look for the rewards. Notice that there are actual benefits of having successful conversations with your partner. It feels so good when we can talk through something and it works. It feels so good. That's a good reward. Take in that moment of peace and enjoy it and enjoy the reward. So here's some things you can do to actually make sure you are paying attention to your ruts and staying out of the bad ones. Identify one reoccurring pattern that you see in your relationship, and I want you to discuss it with your partner. Talk about what that pattern looks like. Don't talk about what they do. Talk about that pattern and what you do in that pattern. Number 2, I want you to practice pausing before reacting. I want you to learn to stop and think before your partner's reacting. You could even, if you needed to, stop the reactivity by saying, babe, you know what? I want to get my head in the right place for this conversation. So can we stop for a second? Let me get ready so I'm emotionally ready to have a really healthy conversation with you. Learn to pause. Just create a little space between the stimulus of whatever we're going to talk about and the response. If you're going to choose to fight, flight, freeze, or if you're going to choose to stay in and get real. The third thing you can do is assume positive intent in your partner's actions and verbalize it during the discussions. Tell your partner how much you appreciate them and always assume their goal is good. Even if it's coming off wrong, their desire is to be with you. So we can slow this down, give them the benefit of the doubt, both sides doing that with each other, and you'll see some pretty amazing things happen.